when Martha Spees mentioned that we could show this, and so I said, oh, we could do it when we have the Jane Addams branch meeting, which we have every month set up, and so we could have it then. So the Jane Addams branch is the virtual branch that it's a real branch because people get all the information that's sent through the member listserv. And so we're having it at this time slot. So I'm excited to have it. I'm going to turn it over to Martha now. Martha?
Hi, everybody. So I'm Martha Spees, and I'm from Portland, Maine. And it's such a wonderful pleasure that we can all join tonight in this event. And we'll have an 8-minute introduction by the filmmaker herself. And she is from Britain. She does speak really, really fast. Well, to me, she speaks fast. So you have to concentrate quite a bit to hear what she's saying, but it's a wonderful welcome to us and how she came to produce this documentary. And then after her introduction, we'll start the program that runs for 1 hour, that runs for 90 minutes, an hour and a half. And then after that, we'll have a discussion section and a comment section, at the most probably a half hour, so it doesn't get too late for us all. So welcome everyone. It's so grand that you could join us, and we'll get started right now with the program, and Ellen will help direct me, and if I mess up trying to get this film going. Thanks.
Hi everyone, I'm Vicki Lesley. I'm the director of the At a Love Affair, which you are about to watch. As you can probably hear, I'm over in the UK, and time difference has meant that I've not really been able to join you for a live discussion, unfortunately. But I did just want to record a few words by way of introduction, and also before we start, of course, to say a huge thank you to WILPF and the Disarm Committee for organising this event. We're right at the start of our distribution journey with this film over in the US. I did have a cinema release here, unfortunately, right at the height of the pandemic, so it ends up being an online release. And the distribution sort of journey of the film obviously has not gone quite as we'd planned, thanks to the pandemic. And so we're releasing the film ourselves over in the States. It's very much a grassroots effort. So if you enjoy this screening tonight, and you're involved with perhaps a local WILPF chapter or any other sort of local groups who you think might find this film interesting, I would absolutely love it if you wanted to organise a screening as well. So I'll talk at the end maybe how you could drop me a line. But huge thanks to the committee for organising the event, and I just thought I would say a few words just to give you a little bit of background to the film and sort of set the scene before we start. And no doubt, I hope there'll be lots of food for thought for you guys to have a discussion afterwards. So the background to this film is it was a very, very long sort of genesis. I actually had the very first idea to make a film about nuclear power all the way back in 2006. And every year goes by, I'm more shocked by how long ago that is now. But back in the mid-2000s, I was working in TV over here in the UK, and also doing a lot of campaigning, mostly with Greenpeace, sort of environmental social justice sort of campaigning. And I was getting kind of disillusioned, to be honest, in my work. I'd come out of university full of grand ideas about making, really socially important documentaries, and I'd ended up really working on a lot of very kind of tabloidy, quite sensationalist programs, and it wasn't really what I wanted to be doing. And so I just was casting around really for a topic that I felt was more meaningful, to make a film by myself. And I sort of look back and laugh at my younger self, who had no idea really what I was getting into when I said I was going to make a film on my own. But it was, in many ways, it was somewhat by chance that I sort of landed on this topic, really. and it's, you know, it's gone on to become this incredibly central part of my life for years. But it was really just that nuclear power was in the news then. It was around the time that the British government under Tony Blair had held an energy review, and they had said we must have nuclear power back in the mix for climate change. And to be honest, I was kind of surprised by that. I think that I thought nuclear power was kind of gone. It was something from the past. I didn't know much about it. I had very sort of dim memories of Chernobyl. I was at school. I was 9 when Chernobyl happened, so I remembered it, but I didn't really have a great understanding of what it actually was. And to be honest, I'm not sure I had a completely clear distinction in my mind between nuclear power and nuclear weapons. I'd also not long since, I'd actually been on an incredibly impactful visit to Hiroshima. My brother in 2003 moved out to live in Japan. He's only just returned this year. He's been out there for the last 20 years, and he and I visited Hiroshima together, and it was definitely one of the most sort of impactful days of my life, really, that visit. I came back, I immediately joined the campaign for nuclear disarmament over here, and you know, it's been the nuclear weapon sort of undercurrent alongside the story of the peaceful atom, so-called, you know, has been something that has been of huge interest to me all the way through the story of making this film. So I guess that was where my interest came from, and then the reality of making an independent film sort of set in. There was sadly there was no one knocking my door down to give me the sort of $250,000 that I needed to make a feature documentary. I had to raise bits of money, you know, through crowdfunding, through small grants, eventually I sold shares in the film. We rinsed all the tax credits, and there's just largely a huge amount of years of sort of unpaid labour from myself and my producer. But you know, so it was a real passion project, but you know, I ploughed away. I always felt like it was really important, and that I knew I would finish it, and I did, I'm happy to say. And so, yeah, the film itself went through a number of guises along the way, but I was always very interested from early on while I was researching, not so much, or not only in actually nuclear power itself as a technology, but more in many ways the stories that have been told around nuclear power, and it was that interest really that kind of ultimately led to this metaphor of the atom as a sort of roguish romantic hero, you know, bad boy, promises you the earth, lets you down, pleads for another chance, you know, this cycle going round and round. You know, it's a kind of tongue-in-cheek metaphor for sure, and definitely at times I'm pushing the metaphor to within an inch of its life. But part of the idea with this metaphor, I think, is to sort of lighten things up a little bit. You know, I want this to be an enjoyable, fun movie experience as much as it's full as it is, with a lot of very, very serious, you know, important politics and history topics. And so, yeah, so the stories that have been told around nuclear power was really what interested me, and that's one of so the film tells that whole story then from sort of 75 years worth of history, from 1945 really up to more or less to today. And it looks at that story in the US, the UK, France and Germany. And, you know, one of the things that I found incredibly interesting was just how the same technology has had this very different experience in the different countries and at different times, at different points in that history, despite the technology itself always being the same. And I feel like, you know, that is still very much relevant today. And actually, certainly in terms of the weapon side of things, it's very alarming, I think, what's happening at the moment in terms of the narrative. This is the in my lifetime, as a, you know, my adult lifetime, I can never remember people talking about an actual possibility of weapons being used and sort of minimizing that maybe it wouldn't be so bad. I mean, it's kind of terrifying, and you know, so it's really important, and I'm very grateful that there are, you know, staunch campaigners like yourselves who are working on these issues. It's really important, and I hope that my film can, you know, in some way help to galvanize people to look at these issues. So yeah, I've probably talked for far too long, but as I say, I really hope you guys enjoy the film, and I would love to hear from you. I would love to hear from you about if you would like to book another screening, but also just I'd love to, have some feedback. I'm very happy to answer any emails or tweets. The best way to find me is by on the film's website, theatomfilm.com. And yeah, I'd love to hear from you. And just once again, thank you so much for hosting this event and organising the screening. I hope you all enjoy it, and yeah, have a great evening. Thank you so much.
Initial reactions to the film, any comments? Let's say,
yeah, I'd like, this is Eileen from Boston area. I lived through all of this. I remember it, and was disgusted whenever the resurrection of pro nukes and nuclear energy came about. This is so very important for people who are new to much of this, especially those who were born within the past decade or two, and it's so badly needed. This is a time we really should be pushing this information. Well, really well done. I think very, very comprehensive. I did mention all this in my note. Thank you again.
Jean, looks like you're up. Oh,
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to say that yesterday was the day that the last 2 nuclear reactors in Germany were closed down. It's a cause for celebration, and this is honoring it in a sense. I just wanted to also say that I wrote an article about nuclear waste for Peace and Freedom and got a very good response. What happened in Germany, the reason for the closing down is that they began to realize that children were coming down with forms of cancer. And I interviewed the man who did, the scientist who did the evaluation in Germany of the effects of nuclear waste. And he thanked our organization for bringing this up. And I just wanted to mention those 2 factors regarding Germany.
great. Thank you, Jean. Barbara, your hand's up?
Yeah. 2 comments. One is that I don't think I totally understood what it took in Germany to come to that stage. And I think the film did a great job of explaining all the currents that led to that tremendous decision. It also made it clear to me that the anti-nuclear demonstrations really had a role in that. It wasn't just a corporate decision or just a governmental decision, but the activists really did help shape policy. And I think we should take heart from that and be renewed in our dedication to overtly opposing it.
Oh, go ahead, Jean.
Well, on that point, thousands and thousands of people marched to 3 Mile Island. I know, I was there. It was a massive demonstration in favor of closing down 3 Mile Island.
Yep.
And if you look at where they have placed, this is a second point that's so shocking to me, where the reactors have been placed. First of all, we have one 20 miles north of Manhattan, which I went to the hearings by Con Edison to close it, and it's taken about 4 or 5 years. Supposedly it's still being closed, and it hasn't been closed down yet. I won't get into the complexity, but they have placed them near cities and in the earthquake zones, especially in California. San Luis Obispo, you can counteract my pronunciation, but there are 3 on earthquake zones. And so they're so dangerous, not just because of the nuclear waste, which seeps into the ground and which cannot be buried. There's no place to put this nuclear waste, which is constantly being produced. And the second factor is that the nuclear reactors are built in such dangerous places.
Right. Alfred, you had your hand up. Go ahead.
Yes, I just have a brief story from the past. I was in 2004 in Madison, Wisconsin. The University of Wisconsin had a big nuclear power conference. I was working with Physicians for Social Responsibility in Wisconsin then, sitting at the table at the dinner at the conference with all the nuclear engineering professors. The dean of the engineering school came to hear, actually it was Victor Galinsky speak, who was in the movie, but when the dean sat down, he turned towards one of the professors who was sitting in between he and I, and the first words out of his mouth were there any demonstrators? And I, as an activist, was quite struck by that. It wasn't about a question, did we get that big grant, or how's the research coming, or whatever. It was, were there any demonstrators? So it's my personal theory that the industry actually knows how vulnerable they are and are very threatened by it. But then again, as the article I put in at the head of the chat early on argues,
it can't solve climate change because it can't. But that doesn't matter. It never gets traction because it doesn't have to, or that it's too expensive. It doesn't matter. We give more subsidies. It has to maintain the illusion of being the cutting edge of technology and the silver bullet that's going to save us from the dire situation in which we are in. But its true purpose is the military. Anyway.
But thank you so much for showing this film. I think it's absolutely phenomenal, and I look forward to helping get it distributed around the country. It's a very engaging motif of the love story.
Thank you, Alfred. That's exactly the kind of thing I was going to say about the nuclear weapons.
Who was that? Joan.
Yes, sorry, I didn't have time to go through the process.
No worries. Can you just say a little bit more?
Well, just what Alfred was saying, that the one of the major purposes of having these nuclear plants is to prepare uranium in shape for, or plutonium or whatever it is, for the nuclear weapons, which we certainly don't need.
Well, if I can just make a brief follow-up comment, it's what strikes me as being so dangerous. It's not that they're making nuclear bombs down at the local nuclear reactor at generating power, but it's the vast industrial infrastructure needed for these operations, that by having so many reactors on land, that builds up the general infrastructure so that we have the capacity to be at the cutting edge of the development of nuclear weapons.
Okay. For any other hands up or questions? Diane, you're unmuted. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was wondering what people thought about the little snippets of, the shows and the different things that, it would talk about something and then it would take a popular show from the past and show it. Did people like that? I thought it was clever. I thought, boy, that's a lot of work, but
Olya says, I loved it. Bruce has his thumbs up.
I actually think that it reminds me of Howard Zinn, who always used humor as a mechanism to allow him to tell you really difficult facts. And because you were chortling along at his dry sense of humor, you could take in these really horrifying things. And this movie covers really horrifying things. So if you can chuckle now and then, you can deal with it emotionally. I think it's a very necessary, a very good technique, but I'd argue very necessary.
Go ahead, Diane.
Yeah, I agree. I think it was interesting and added a lot to the whole thing.
We'll be sharing this recording of what people are saying with the producer. So if you have anything that you want to tell Vicki, please speak up.
Oh yeah, I want to hear something from you. Do you have any comments for Vicki?
Good evening, everyone. It's so nice to meet you face to face. I'm just so thankful for the opportunity to see this movie. This movie has been on my list, and I remember a few times you were mentioning in your newsletter about this documentary. It's very informative to me, and I want to understand more. Because, you know, my goal is, as a citizen of the world, to do good, the common good.
It's great. Oh, thank you. Anyone else? Jean has a next question. If anyone else has anything before that. Go ahead, Jean.
I think it's a little bit long maybe for the general audience. For us who are specialists, it wasn't too long because it renewed details that we had forgotten or we needed to relearn. I was very, very impressed with it. I agree that its humor is important. But I wanted to mention, this is a worldwide movement. I twice went to Japan, and the Japanese hosted hundreds and hundreds of people in their two location conferences, anti-nuclear conferences. And they were at, of course, Hiroshima and Nagasaki. And it was just massive. And it's still kind of simmering and not as well known as it was, the anti-nuclear movement, that is. And so anything that we can do to promote anti-nuclear, I think is very, very valuable. And I also think that even on the local level, it's very valuable. That's where this film can be helpful.
I would like to say something. Thank you, Jean. You reminded me to say something here that I try to say whenever I get an opportunity. I have good news for everyone. And again, I just want to tip my hat to Carol Urner, who is not with us any longer, because she was very instrumental in helping to bring WILPF over to working on Proposition 1, which is what we call, what Eleanor Holmes Norton has been introducing into the House of Representatives each session since 1994, and she's about to introduce it again for the 16th time, I think, or something like that. And it's the Nuclear Weapons Abolition and Conversion Act. It used to be longer. We're making it shorter this time. And not only is it calling for support for the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons, it's calling for using the money saved to convert the nuclear industries to producing carbon-free, nuclear-free energy. And so I will be posting the bill number on the prop1.org website, which I'll put in the chat, as soon as we have it. But we're asking people to try to get your representative to co-sponsor it before she even introduces it. She's holding off on introducing until she gets some co-sponsors that will introduce it with her, because in the past she's always introduced it herself and then other representatives will sign on. But it has more impact if there's more than one person introducing it, particularly since she's not really a formal representative. She's a delegate. So please actively work on that, because that's something that can be done. It's really an important idea that has been, we've been struggling to make it happen since 1990. And we need help. Thank you. Jean.
What number is that?
We don't have a number yet. I'm going to put it on the prop1.org site. I will get it out to everybody in the Disarm Committee and on Nuke News at Yahoo Groups and Nuke News on Facebook and NUCNEWS.
Sorry, you have your hand up. Go ahead, Mary Sanderson.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, good. Thank you. Thank you very much for holding this. And I too came at least partly because I remember Carol's work and remember Carol's presence and everything. It inspired me to make sure I could attend. When you mentioned that we might say something back to the producer, I would ask that when she makes more excellent documentaries about these tough situations, to focus more on the finance and the money behind these efforts. The nuclear industry, no matter what happens, they don't give up. And what is the monetary force behind their work? And I think we need to look, I personally am working on the monetary system and the problem of all the money out there being created as debt by banks. So you have these profit-making banks in control of the money. And I wish when they make, wonderful, informative programs like this about so many topics that are affected by the monetary system, I wish that the producers would go into that a little more. It was mentioned a little bit towards the end of the 80s, but just very much in passing. And then there was a part about how, well, the financing is so complicated. Well, let's look at that. Okay, thank you. Thank you. Thank you. I can't thank you enough.
Yeah, those are good points. Speaking of the next generation of small modular nuclear reactors and funding, anyone on this call? I see we only have a couple minutes left, but does anyone on this call have any comments about the small nuclear reactors and people like Bill Gates funding them and other companies, other money behind them? I see Alfred's unmuting himself. And then we've got Jean after Alfred. Go ahead, Alfred.
Yeah, I'll try to be brief here. As I think I might have mentioned, maybe it was before we formally started, small modular nuclear reactors, their real purpose, in my understanding, and according to Michael Schneider, who writes the World Nuclear Industry Status Report, which is a phenomenal source of information. But in his 2018 report, he talked about SMNRs as being for nuclear propulsion units for the nuclear navy. So they're being sold to us as, coming to every town and going to replace every coal burning power plant. But, that its real purpose is military. Secondly, like with Bill Gates's natrium reactor, that uses HALEU fuel, high assay low enriched uranium fuel. And this is a very nasty thing. High enrichment is at 20% U-235. HALEU fuel goes to 19.8. So it's still low enriched, but it's right up to the border of high enriched, which really is more suitable for weapons. And getting to 20% enrichment is the lion's share of the work of getting to 90% enrichment. So it's terrible proliferation programs. And then it has the further thing, if you follow the news, there's a big push that we need to develop within the United States our own system of making this HALEU fuel. Right now, the source of HALEU fuel is Russia. And so that's put a big monkey wrench in Mr. Gates's plans. But the call and the big action in Congress is we need to develop the entire nuclear fuel chain here in the US to make this so-called high assay low enriched uranium. So SMNRs are bad news, but I think it's mostly just a cover story to get to gain public opinion of nuclear. So everybody talks about, oh yeah, we're going to have one of those too in our neighborhood. Isn't that great? We're going to have dependable baseload power, and if we need more, we just plug another one in like Lego blocks. And oh, the other thing is, these are PowerPoint reactors. They only exist on paper. You can't go buy one today. You know, and if you're really thinking about climate change, it's going to be 20 years before we'll know if they even work, much less how many can we produce in the next 5 to 10 years.
Great. Thank you. Lots to digest there. Jean?
Yeah, following up on what you just said, Bill Gates has been in support of small mobile units of nuclear reactors for at least 30 years, as has John Kerry, Senator John Kerry of Massachusetts. He's not senator now, but many of these people have been supporting it. Obama's campaign manager was the PR man for the Nuclear Institute in Chicago. And there are all sorts of interactions and intertwinings of nuclear politics with regular so-called politics. So I think this discussion has been very valuable. And, you know, I commend everyone who's been paying attention, that's for sure.
Okay. So with that, I just want to thank everyone for sticking with us. I appreciate that we could all share this program and that we had the discussion. And I learned a lot, and I hope you did too. Thank you.
Thank you, Martha. That was great. Thank you.
And good night. I think that Ellen and I are going to stick around to make sure that we catch the chat, but otherwise you're not impolite to take off. Thank you.
Okay, bye.